In this video, I want to go over some of the most recent Fallout 76 news, as actually quite a bit has been happening with the game, in particular over the past couple of days. Just a couple of days ago, Fallout 76 received a new hotfix, this fixing a few bugs, enabling some features, but the big point to actually patch some aspects of One Wasteland, the recent rebalance to come to the game. And although it of course did all of that, unfortunately it also did some other things, and added a few unforeseen features and broke some things along the way. So I want to talk a bit about that, and hopefully if you're having some of these problems, you will no longer feel alone. Separate from that, Fallout 76's public test server also just received a pretty sizable update. 40 gigabytes in size. There is a ton to look at in this. In today's video, I'm going to mostly focus on what's live in the public test server right now, that being the new camp shelters feature, as well as a few other more hidden or minor changes. But even further, there also is a ton in the way of data mines. And I mean, one of the biggest Fallout 76 data mines we've had to date, so there's a lot to unpack, but I should have a video out on that tomorrow. It was just too big for this one. If you guys enjoy the content or just want to stay up to date with Fallout 76, you can get subscribed. Again, a big data mine video tomorrow, as well as a new update in the next couple of weeks. But with that said, let's first and foremost take a look at the most recent hotfix for Fallout 76 and some of the issues surrounding this, and just lingering issues with the game in general. This hotfix did a couple of things. First and foremost, the main focus was to address the mid-level challenge difficulties with One Wasteland. One Wasteland, making it so enemies will scale to your level, so if you're level 20, you will always find level 20 enemies to a certain point. But an issue that was found as you were on the way from level 20 to roughly 50 was things just got increasingly difficult to an almost unmanageable degree, because at points facing enemies that were always matching your level, especially some smaller tier enemies like mole rats or even minor ghouls, posed a pretty big threat, and it almost made it so you always had a tough fight. So in this hotfix, what Bethesda did was actually reduce some of the stats of those enemies in the mid-range. So if you're level 20 to 40 in Fallout 76, hypothetically certain enemies are a bit easier. Like ghouls seem to have significantly lower health at levels 20 to 30, but some enemies seem relatively unaffected, like the Scorched. Either way, thus far, it seems like it is a very positive change for the game, although there definitely is still a pretty big demand for more, even for non-mid levels. One Wasteland made it so a lot of otherwise kind of forgettable or even easy challenges or enemy encounters were actually a lot more difficult now. Like when you have a bunch of level 100 mole rats attacking you that can one-shot you on a bloodied build, that makes those otherwise forgettable encounters previously now pretty tough, and you have to actually think or deal with it. Bethesda hasn't said much about additional balance changes or patches from this most recent balance adjustment and One Wasteland overall, but I did want to echo in this video that it definitely feels like playing the update over the past couple of weeks that some more changes are needed, an additional balance pass. A few other minor things to come with this. The weight bench from Season 2 did make a return. On release, this was broken, stacking unlimitedly. Now it does provide +2 strength again. There's also a new bug where some users would be able to engage in PvP with players in pacifist mode if you had a certain legendary perk card equipped, but that too has been patched. And that was really the gist of the hotfix, except it came with some unforeseen circumstances and even a few things that weren't patched that people really wanted to be. A couple of ones that were there immediately following the hotfix going live but were quickly fixed. A colossal problem after the servers went up was just undoable. For a couple of hours, no matter how many nukes were launched, a colossal problem, the event in-game, would not spawn. Players were not able to connect to Fallout 76 via Steam. It was saying you had modified files, aka illegal mods installed, but of course they didn't have illegal mods installed. But again, this was one that was also quickly fixed in just an hour or so. But a few that have actually lingered from this hotfix. There's been this bug where everyone on your friends list appears offline. Naturally, as you want to go play with some of your friends, that could be pretty frustrating, even just in seeing which of your friends are currently active. Bethesda has responded to this issue on numerous posts and even just as of yesterday, so hopefully it's something getting addressed, but it has persisted over the past few days. Another one that seems to have just recently popped up are new crashing and freezing issues due to certain hardware or maybe even drivers. It's not totally clear what spawned this, but you can pretty clearly see it started right after this hotfix, or most of it started after this hotfix, where now players will find they can only play Fallout 76 in 10-minute or so intervals, and then it'll crash to desktop or the game will just freeze and you have to close it. It's not totally clear what's leading to this. This is another one Bethesda has said numerous times they're actively investigating, actually collecting data from those affected. It doesn't seem super widespread. I still know many people able to play the game actively, but of course if this does impact you and your hardware, that is kind of a big problem. It seems like it's really only affecting PC, and although it seems predominantly for those with Ryzen CPUs, there's some Intel there also. It seems to be impacting those both with updated and outdated drivers, so it's not totally clear what the issue is, but if you've been having this problem, just know you're not not alone. There's a ton of posts and a ton of community managers trying to get to the bottom of it. Although one explanation for at least some of these problems is the fact that Bethesda with this update actually reverted the Fallout 76 EXE. It's not clear if this was intentional or unintentional, but prior to the update, we were on the 1.4 version of the EXE, and following the update, we got the 1.3 version. So put simply, we were actually put back onto an older, previously released version of the Fallout 76 EXE. Now again, whether or not this is the cause of all of these problems just isn't clear. There could be multiple causes. It could cause some of the problems, but not all. But it without a doubt put some fuel to the fire that there are some version control issues internally with Fallout 76, and they are persisting. Now again, perhaps this was intended by them, but based off the fact that there's been more problems than typical with this hotfix and this EXE problem, it definitely seems like there might be at least some connection there. Another complaint is some stuff just was not fixed with this hotfix that probably should have been. Since the most recent update to the game, there's been an issue with this score pop-up. It is infuriating. It is widespread on the public test server also, so it's not fixed there. After ranking up, it'll just cycle through all of the ranks and kind of clutter your screen. It's really, really annoying, actually, particularly for me because I can't film normally while this is happening. I just have to wait for it to finish, which might take a few minutes. This really cool new Enclave power armor was posted to the Atomic Shop, but they literally forgot the butt plate. Like as you can see in these images, there's meant to be a little metal piece here, but in game, it's just gone. It's empty. You can see the power armor frame through the power armor. Not the biggest deal, but many people have taken to calling this the diaper power armor as a joke following it. And with all of these issues, I don't want people to think I'm just kind of focusing on them saying, oh no, the game's in a dire state. For most of them, it's not the end of the world. The crashing issue is definitely a pretty big one, but it seems to affect a relatively small portion of the audience, and they are actively investigating at the very least. But I think it's important to highlight some of these things so they actually get fixed. There clearly is a fundamental problem with Bethesda. Something that they're doing as far as pushing some of these updates or how they're testing some of these updates is not working, just due to the sheer fact that we so often get updates that break things. And I think highlighting the fact that that is still going on is an important step in actually getting it fixed to make sure it stops happening in the future, especially with some of the Atomic Shop stuff. Like this is such a silly and stupid thing, but for $14, I'd be kind of frustrated if I was really looking forward to this power armor and it looks like I have a diaper on. I feel like just in general, we could probably do better. And then we also saw the return of Fallout 76's public test server. This was initially set to go live on Thursday, but they ran into a problem while trying to put it up, so it ended up coming out on Friday. And what this brought to the game was vault shelters. This being a very exciting new feature that basically makes it so you can place down a little door at your camp, and once inside, you have a totally separate and more free building area. More free in the sense that there are less building rules or restrictions overall. You could freely place things in the air, you could toggle snapping off and just kind of spam things all over, but also these things have a giant build budget. It actually was difficult. It took me a while to fill up these rooms overall, but before we get into exactly what they are, the pros and cons, let me give you a better overview of what this is and kind of the background on it. So on release, there's going to be 3 types of vault shelters. You have the utility room, the lobby, and the atrium. As you can see in the background, all 3 of these have distinctively different sizes and even somewhat layouts. The utility room being very straightforward, kind of just a small room and then a slightly larger room that you can build in. The lobby to me is actually the worst of the bunch. It has staircases and it could just kind of be 2 large rooms, but instead there's weird levels to it, but it is distinctively bigger than the utility room and overall pretty big in size, but probably going to be the least popular. And then lastly, you do have the atrium, which is basically just a giant vault interior. As you can see, you have this big midsection and then actually a side area where you could climb through, a little room on the side, and then actually the overseer's office that you can also build in. And the breakdown with these is the utility room will be free for everyone from day one. So the day this gets added to the game, you can use the utility room and place it at your camp. And the door for the utility room is this little shelter, at least right now on the public test server. The lobby is initially going to be a Fallout First exclusive. So if you're a member of Fallout First, you will get this for free. Pretty good timing by Bethesda as the Fallout First year-long subscriptions are running out right around now. And this is a good incentive to get people to resubscribe at least somewhat. Although after it leaves Fallout First, seemingly after a month, it'll be available for purchase via Atoms. So you have that route alternatively. And then finally, the biggest of the bunch will be purchasable via Atoms once this update goes live. The last 2 with the lobby and the atrium actually have interchangeable doors. So you could use this little interior vault door and actually set it to either lead to the lobby or the atrium. And then you also do have this giant one. It's kind of like a big vault door and it looks really cool, but it's almost too big to actually place down in some sense. This one too, you could set to either enter into the lobby or the atrium, but it's very hard to place just due to the sheer size and the camp build zone in general. So unless you're on perfect flat land or you're just dedicating a subsection of your camp to to placing this thing, I'm sure a lot of people will use one of the other two. Unfortunately, even though that little hatch I think is the coolest of the 3 doors, right now that hatch only works for the smallest utility room. You can't switch it to one of the other ones. Although something to look forward to, even though these are the 3 shelters going to be available on release, a bunch of other types have been data mined. This comes from the data miner Discord. I'll have a link to it down below if you want to join and find out some of this information for yourself. Firstly, it looks like there are more shelters in the pipeline, at least based on the data mines. Who knows though, maybe these are just hypothetical ones that never came to fruition and will never come to fruition. But based on this being a new Atomic Shop edition, you have to imagine that a bunch of these will actually get implemented. So you have things like the greenhouse shelter, we have a bunch of the vault shelters that we have already, but then more interesting things like the bunker shelter for the Brotherhood of Steel, a cave, a barn, the greenhouse shelter, shelters themed around crater and foundation, and even the Mistress of Mysteries, the waterfall cave probably being the coolest sounding one on this. And even further outside of that, there's also some listings for unique shelter building options, basically vault themed things that hypothetically would match this vault themed shelter. Although it's not totally clear if that's going to be an Atomic Shop item or just something you earn for free in game. The first shelter, the free one, you'll actually unlock by a quest in game, although it's not active in the PTS right now. A couple of interesting observations from these shelters. There are a few restrictions. You actually can't place down vending machines inside, allies inside, or even fast travel directly inside of one. Although, if you are on a team with someone, by hovering over their camp, you could actually see if they have a shelter placed down and which type they have placed down based on the icon. Unfortunately, this is not currently a feature for other players' camps, so like the vending icon that pops up, that'd be a cool addition in the future. Even further, when actually at somebody's camp, at times, it could be pretty hard to find the door. It'd be cool if there was a little mini-map icon once you enter into someone's camp that showed you where the door was so you could go check it out. In the past, Bethesda mentioned in some articles and interviews how there'd be a way to lock these so only your friends could enter, but right now in the public test server, that is not a currently active feature, but who knows, it could just be coming down the road. One interesting quirk of these is you could actually place shelter doors inside of shelters. So you can make it so you have one door leading into the utility room, and the utility room is kind of the hub to get to the other two. You can place down all 3 doors and have all 3 shelters active on the public test server, but this is also carrying over to live servers, and they all have independent build limits, which are massive, as I mentioned before. You can place down a ton of stuff in one room, and then once you kind of fill it up and want to try something different, move on to one of the other ones, whether it be bigger or smaller. Many of the shelters have built-in snap points on the floor, so you could have walls snap right in. You don't have to assign a floor or place a floor or anything. And again, as I mentioned before, you could toggle this off. The budget on these cannot be understated. It was actually hard for me to use up the entire budget on all 3 sizes. Although something that'd be pretty handy, especially with testing, is a way to wipe these, which there currently isn't. So for this one, an example, I have to go by hand and delete all of these items if I want them out, which is a nightmare and probably not going to happen if I'm being realistic. I'm just going to stick to building on the 2 smaller ones. The load time in these, at least on the public test server, is pretty short, considering you are loading a relatively small area, although take that with a particularly large grain of salt because who knows how it'll be on live servers. You also get a notification when someone goes in and out of one of your shelters, and it'll tell you which one they went in. Although one of the very bizarre or just kind of questionable choices around these by Bethesda is you actually can't put displays inside of your shelters, at least right now on the public test server. The display choice is just not there on the build menu while you're inside of a shelter, even though it is on the exterior of a shelter. This is bizarre to me because I feel like displaying things is one of the best uses of shelters, considering it does have a separate camp budget. If you don't know, when you actually fill up a display case in Fallout 76, all of those things on display are also using your camp budget, so it could get pretty pricey if you want to showcase a ton of stuff. Having a little vault to show off all your cool weapons or items would have been a natural choice, you would think, but overall it's kind of an interesting one in that it's kind of hard to build a structure inside of a vault, because inevitably you're building a structure inside of a relatively small structure to begin with. Creating individual rooms that aren't these predefined ones is a bit awkward, especially when right now we don't actually have a building set that matches the style here. Now again, based on that data mine, it's almost certainly on the way for the Atomic Shop or not, but at least thus far those seem to be some of the restrictions or challenges people are running into as they try and build cool things in these. Although who knows, as things evolve, people get more familiar with them, maybe we'll see some pretty epic creations. But something else that's an odd choice or just really a missed opportunity with these is there's not integrated power, so you have to place down independent power sources to light your lights or other things in your shelter. Even though there are built-in lights, you'll have to connect your own wires to all of your lights. I feel like just having a built-in power source or an area to place a power source and power all of the walls that you could place on would be kind of cool and a lot better, open up a lot more creative freedom. The doors themselves are kind of odd to use. Like, you can place them on a wall, but otherwise it's kind of weird. The actual shelter door is fine, but the two vault doors are just either giant or don't really fit in anywhere. It'd be nice to have one that just fits into a regular door frame. There's some miscellaneous junk items throughout these shelters that you just can't move. It'd be nice if you could delete those or even move them around for yourself. In the shelters, the floors are static. So if you want to have your own custom floor that you perhaps bought on the Atomic Shop, you'd have to double layer floors more or less. It'd be cool if you could kind of delete or just change the base floor layer of the shelter and put your own down. I think that'd be a really positive change. And speaking broadly on this feature, I'm not personally a super big camp builder and not good at it at all, but it definitely feels like one of those things that Bethesda can build on in the future. And it feels like a great framework for builders in this game. I think we're going to see some pretty crazy and awesome camp builds, even just in the 12 or so hours since this came out. People are posting images online of absolutely crazy things they're building in these, and I'm very excited to see where this goes. Camp building and actually having vendors so you could fast travel to other people's camps has without a doubt been one of the best features ever to come to Fallout 76. And I think camp shelters could be a really cool way to build atop that, really showcasing just how unique this community can be. And even if you yourself aren't a huge builder, I think it's going to be pretty cool to see just how much custom stuff people can do in these, how much they could push the game now with these lightened build limits. Bethesda put out a blanket request this weekend for people to jump on the PTS and test this to try and really stress test the servers and have as many people as possible messing around with these. And even further, they actually added some free Atomic Shop items to your account on the public test server. Not all of them, but just some that will only be there during the public test server. And even further, of course, there's no item requirement to build things, so you could build freely. And finally, if you do mess around with vault shelters, there are some things you could do and you actually will get a PTS pennant in the future. So overall, I think this is a very interesting and great addition to Fallout 76. It's one of those things that's going to really add to the game over the next couple of years as the game continues on and people build cooler and cooler things, find new ways to evolve with these, and of course, as Bethesda inevitably sells us some new shelters to explore. But it also feels like this is one of those features where if Bethesda does make some of those improvements, listen to feedback as it comes right now, it could be way better in the future. There's a lot of little things that I think could be improved. And even further, just different types of shelters. The vault shelters have a certain restriction due to their theme, but some of these other ones on the horizon could open up some very cool or interesting builds that we've just never seen in Fallout 76 thus far. Although, even though this was the main appeal of the public test server, and technically all they said was changed with it, there's several other hidden changes. Right off the bat, you could actually find Fort Atlas, now labeled as Fort Atlas, no longer Atlas Observatory, and even further, you could find some Brotherhood hopefuls all throughout, as well as a slight redesign. Nothing super crazy, there's no new dialogue or anything like that, although something that does have quite a bit more dialogue is the Crater War Room. So on the backside of Crater, you'll now actually find that there's a new door. It was actually that old door that led nowhere, but now actually functions, and this will put you into the Crater War Room, and these guys will play a role in the upcoming DLCs. I don't want to talk to them or spoil too much, but if you want to check them out in the PTS, they are there. You can talk to them. In my next video, I'll go over the spoilers of this. The Hunger and Thirst change is live on the public test server, so no longer will those bars turn red, and even further, there's no debuff to having low hunger or thirst. Instead, you have this buff if you have full hunger or thirst, and of course the scales depending on how satiated you are. And then lastly, or at least the last one I could find, considering technically all of these are unmarked, Vault 51 is now a location. So you can discover it, you actually find the exterior is slightly edited, as well as there's actually a shelter you can enter into. This will be the quest that kicks off the shelter system and how you unlock your first shelter once the update goes live. As I mentioned before, there is a lot in the game and in the files that I don't really want to dive into in this video. A lot of spoilers about what is to come. We have a pretty good idea of what we're getting with Steel Dawn, and even in some sense what's coming after Steel Dawn as a result of what's there now. So we'll have that in the coming days, as well as images on new items, weapons, armors. And actually a lot of this content is in-game right now. There are certain doors that are barred off, but you can glitch into and find some pretty interesting things. But some of those things are massive spoilers. So again, I'll save that for a different video where there's a better spoiler warning. So if you want to get subscribed, look forward to the data mining video coming in the future. Otherwise, as always, again, I thank you for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.